At 02:15 on day 14 of Operation Epic Fury, encrypted IRGC communications spiked to levels never before recorded. Beneath Tehran, a deep penetration strike had just reached Iran's most protected bunker. Hours later, the Pentagon confirmed what the signals suggested. The Supreme Leader was wounded and disfigured. With the chain of command fractured, the question was no longer whether Iran could fight back, but whether the regime could survive. Encrypted communications on the primary command net of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps surged at 2:15 a.m., coinciding with the strike on Tehran's deepest bunker. The Pentagon's Day 14 statement referenced a high-value casualty, but the credibility of the Supreme Leader's injury rests on a chain of technical and medical indicators. A hospital admission log surfaced from a secure Tehran facility, listing a patient under the code YL14, an identifier previously reserved for regime leadership. The log recorded emergency facial surgery and the presence of a specialist trauma team. U.S. Signals Intelligence intercepted a spike in encrypted traffic on the same channel, and command handoff procedures were initiated within minutes of the blast. Analysts traced these messages to secondary bunkers in Isfahan and Shiraz, suggesting a rapid redistribution of authority. Simultaneously, commercial satellite imagery captured a dense smoke plume and structural collapse at coordinates matching the Supreme Leader's known refuge. The sequence of strike impact, medical log entry, and command network disruption forms a coherent forensic trail. No public footage of the Supreme Leader has surfaced since the event, and subsequent regime broadcasts featured only archival images. The operational logic behind targeting the command node was clear: sever the regime's decision-making, force a vacuum at the top, and accelerate internal disarray. This is not 2003. The campaign's intent is to dismantle Iran's warfighting capacity through precision air power, not occupation. With the senior leadership wounded and the command structure fractured, Iran's ability to coordinate defense or retaliation is now fundamentally compromised. Exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi's televised roadmap for a post-Islamic republic. Iran arrived as encrypted command traffic still rippled through the regime's fractured networks. In his broadcast, Pahlavi outlined a phased transition, an interim national council, a referendum on the country's political system under international supervision, and free elections within 6 months. The roadmap promised a symbolic role for the monarchy, with the crown prince stepping aside after a civilian president takes office. Diaspora channels amplified the message, but intelligence assessments remained skeptical. A declassified CIA briefing estimated that only 15 to 20% of Iran's voting-age population expressed support for a monarchical restoration, mostly concentrated in the northwest and among urban youth. The clerical establishment, still embedded within the security apparatus, showed little sign of fracturing. Open-source protest tracking recorded a brief surge in public demonstrations. 42 events logged from March 2nd to March 9th, peaking with over 12,000 protesters in Tehran's Azadi Square. Yet most gatherings faded after the Supreme Leader's reported injury, and only a minority openly endorsed the Crown Prince. No organized militias or armed factions declared allegiance to any external claimant. U.S. intelligence and think tank analysts noted that the regime's institutional machinery, though shaken, continued to function. The chain of command adapted, secondary bunkers activated, and the Revolutionary Guard maintained discipline in key urban centers. While the succession crisis exposed vulnerabilities, the prospect of an immediate regime collapse remained remote. The campaign's architects intended to force this internal reckoning through sustained air pressure, not occupation. This is not 2003. The operation's logic rests on the belief that relentless attrition, targeting leadership, missile arsenals, and naval capacity will eventually tip the balance. Yet the regime's internal resilience remains a critical variable. Missile and drone launch activity across Iran dropped by an estimated 90% in the 2 weeks following the first wave of strikes. Independent satellite-based tracking counted approximately 210 launches in February. By March 10th, that number had fallen to just 20, confirmed by both UN infrared flash detection and commercial radar sources. Pentagon battle damage assessments attribute this collapse to the systematic destruction of production, storage, and launch infrastructure. The Kerman missile complex, once the core of Iran's medium-range arsenal, was reduced to a cratered shell after a B-52 strike on March 2nd. Maxar imagery captured collapsed silos and blackened launch pads. A UN panel of experts report listed 12 out of 15 operational missile sites neutralized. The Isfahan drone assembly plant, targeted by precision-guided munitions, showed evidence of secondary explosions and fire damage, disrupting both manufacturing and deployment pipelines. The effect extended beyond hardware. Iranian radar emissions, especially from the S-300 network, dropped by 70% over a 48-hour window. This left air defense corridors exposed and forced surviving launch units to operate without integrated targeting data. The operational result is this: Iran's ability to coordinate retaliatory missile or drone strikes was crippled, with launch rates falling to a fraction of pre-campaign levels. This is not 2003. The campaign's logic is attrition by air power, dismantling Iran's warfighting capacity while avoiding the liabilities of a ground invasion. With missile and drone forces sharply reduced, the regime's deterrent posture is now fundamentally weakened, and command nodes remain vulnerable to further precision engagement. A 40-meter crater now scars the heart of the Parchin complex, evidence of a direct hit by a deep penetration munition. Satellite forensics pinpoint the blast's origin to a sequence of coordinated bomber runs, each sortie logged in the U.S. Air Force's mission architecture. The B-1 Lancer, flying from RAF Lakenheath in England, delivered its payload after a 3,000-mile ingress, supported by aerial refueling and electronic warfare escorts. Over 14 days, the bomber fleet, including B-1 Lancers, B-2 Spirits, and B-52 Stratofortresses, executed more than 450 sorties, targeting a reported 5,500 military facilities, command bunkers, missile silos, and naval assets across Iran. Automatic dependent surveillance broadcast data, scraped from public feeds, confirm the high-altitude profiles and timing of these missions. The sortie logs align with the doctrine articulated by planners like Lieutenant General David Deptula: sequencing stealth assets for final penetration, overwhelming defenses with precision timing, and using standoff ISR to cue each strike. As Deptula put it, this is not 2003. The campaign's architecture is built for sustained, high-tempo attrition, not ground occupation. The operational logic is visible in the after-action imagery: collapsed bunkers, neutralized launch pads, and a shattered naval presence in the Gulf. Each sortie is a node in a networked assault designed to degrade Iran's warfighting capacity and depth. The cumulative effect: leadership in chaos, command and control fractured, and critical infrastructure systematically dismantled, underscores the belief that AIR power alone can tip the regime toward collapse. The evidence at Parchin and across the strike map reflects this doctrine in action. Commercial satellite frames from Maxar, timestamped March 13th and March 14th, reveal a pattern of devastation at Iran's principal naval facilities. The Bandar Abbas shipyard, once crowded with hulls, now displays a scatter of burned-out frames and submerged superstructures. Automated identification system data, routinely polled by maritime security analysts, shows a sudden silence, with over 30 Iranian naval vessels dropping off the grid between March 2nd and March 10th. The blackout includes 2 Kilo-class submarines, multiple patrol boats, and a surface drone carrier that was last logged outbound from Qeshm Island before a confirmed strike. The absence of movement from these platforms, combined with visible wreckage in port and at sea, supports U.S. Central Command's claim that more than 50 ships were sunk or rendered inoperable. Additional Maxar imagery highlights secondary explosions at mine depots and ordnance bunkers, with scorched craters radiating from the blast centers. The removal of these assets from the Gulf is not theoretical. It is evidenced by the abrupt disappearance of hull numbers from both satellite and automated identification system records. The operational result is clear. Iran's naval force, once a persistent threat in the Strait of Hormuz, is now functionally absent from the tactical equation. This is not 2003. The campaign's architecture is built on the systematic removal of maritime power, denying the regime its ability to contest sea lanes or launch retaliatory strikes from the Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz, just 21 miles wide, channels nearly 20% of the world's oil trade. Control of these waters is more than a regional contest. It is a lever on global markets. Since the campaign began, freight and insurance costs have jumped into double digits, and oil futures have reacted sharply. The International Energy Agency warns that even a brief closure could send shockwaves through energy markets, with supply chains stretched and prices climbing. Admiral James Stavridis points out that while removing Iranian fast attack craft restores navigation, it brings volatility. The cost of stability is sudden economic stress. Retaliation has come swiftly. Department of Defense briefings confirm 140 U.S. service members wounded in regional attacks, most from Iranian-backed drones and rockets targeting coalition bases and infrastructure. These casualties, though small compared to the scale of operations, reveal the constant risk of escalation. Legal scrutiny now shapes the campaign's boundaries. After a March 3rd strike damaged a hospital in Bahrain, the Pentagon Inspector General opened a formal inquiry, examining whether targeting followed the law of armed conflict. Investigators are reviewing proportionality and intelligence validation, with international pressure for transparency. As Dr. Michael Schmidt notes, even dual-use sites demand careful balance between military gain and civilian harm. The campaign's architects rely on air and sea power, betting that dominance can deter further disruption without triggering wider war. Iran's command structure reels, and its military capacity is sharply degraded. Naval power is neutralized, missile launches drop by over 90%, and leadership fractures deepen. This is not 2003. No occupation, only relentless air dominance. The regime's future now hinges on whether internal collapse becomes inevitable or resistance adapts. Your thoughts?